Hello everyone, and welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andy Bentley, and I, as always, am your host. Now, the Commander's Forge is an area for me to talk about magic, Commander, and basically anything else that I feel like I want to talk about as I try to bring mental health into gaming. And sometimes I just talk about what I want to talk about because this is my podcast. Now, recently, I've noticed decks that I put together a couple of years ago that were like a reasonable, like $150 to $200 deck have very different deck costs now, sitting above $300 or $400. So I started going through and looking at stuff that was only $2, maybe $3 when I first put it in the deck. That's now just slightly more. And so I just kind of wanted to compile a list of cards that I would like to see Wizards reprint more, or semi-consistently at least. And I want to lead this off with I in no way hold any sway over anything that Wizards does, because no one listens to this podcast. That said, I'm going to start with some honorable mentions, because everyone's going to expect them to be here. It's just all 10 fetch lands, and all 10 shock lands. Just keep printing them. People want them. People will want them forever. And then any of the other fetchable lands, things like the Triomes, the Battle for Zendikar lands, that kind of stuff, those are great things to like throw in precons. I'm just throwing it out there. But now that I got that out of the way, we're going to start this off in WUBRG order and then move into some colorless stuff and some multicolored stuff at the end. So let's kick it off with white. The first card I have singled out for white here is Smothering Tithe, which I'm sure most people would have seen coming a mile away. But Smothering Tithe, 3 and a white enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you make a treasure token. This is currently, and I'm using Card Kingdom prices for this because it's the first price that EDH Rec lists. Card Kingdom has this sitting at $39.99. So $40 for a Smothering Tithe. I know some people think Smothering Tithe is a problem, but it's a problem in white, so I feel like that kind of evens it out. Like, white is still several years away from playing full catch-up to green or any of the other colors. It's getting closer to, like, red's level at this point. Next up on that white list, we have Teferi's Protection. Again, another card I'm sure people saw coming. 2 and a white for an instant. Until your next turn, your life total can't change. You gain protection from everything, and all permanents you control phase out. This is currently sitting at $27.99, and it's actually seen a couple reprints and still commanding that price. So, again, this is a decent card that would be good for precons. I'm just throwing it out there. After that, I'm looking at Land Tax. Now, Land Tax is a single white mana, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library for up to 3 planes if an opponent controls more lands than you. Again, they go to your hand, not into play, but that is kind of white's way of quote-unquote ramping, is just making sure you consistently hit your land drops. This is commanding a price of $37.99. And considering it only gets basic planes, I don't see why this would be a hard card to reprint. It just, it boggles the mind. But after that, we're looking at Anointed Procession, another enchantment, 3 and a white. If a source you control would make a token, it makes double those tokens. That's sitting at $39.99. And I get, like, doubling tokens is a very powerful thing in Magic. But $40 for something that shouldn't be $40. Then again, don't get me started on doubling season and parallel lives, because I also don't think they should be, $80 and $70 respectively. But I digress. The last card I have for white is Esper Sentinel. And yes, I realize Esper Sentinel is a relatively new card, but it is a single white mana for an artifact creature. It's a human soldier. It's a 1/1. And then whenever one of your opponents casts their first non-creature spell each turn, they can pay X, where X is its power. If they don't, you draw a card. This should not be a $20 card. It's sitting at $19.99 right now. It's the kind of thing that white gets to do slightly worse than the other colors, but at least now it can do it. I just hold firm to this card should not be $20. And that's all I'm going to go into for white. I'm sure there are plenty more, but for now, let's shift our attention from white to blue. Now, the first blue card, and I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone. I doubt anybody is going to be surprised by the cards I have in blue. Starting with Cyclonic Rift. Cyclonic Rift is an instant for 1 and a blue. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. Then it has Overload for 6 and a blue. When you cast it for its Overload cost, you change the text by replacing all instances of target with each. Card has seen a couple of reprints over the years. It's still a $33 card. And I get it's powerful. I do. And I get some people just don't like playing against it, but it is a viable strategy to help blue decks win the game. Sure, it can also just extend the game for no reason, but the people who do that just are mean people. Alright, that's... Moving on. Next up I have Rhystic Study. I have a couple of things for this one. The first one being, it's an enchantment for 2 and a blue that says whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. It's currently sitting at $38, and we would like to see it reprinted a little more with non-turf art, if you catch my meaning. The Judge version, spectacular. Let's use that art, or commission some new art. Just reprint new art. That's all I'm asking. Into our next one, though. Mystical Tutor. It's an instant for a single blue. Search the library for an instant or sorcery card. Reveal that card, shuffle your library, put that card on top of it. I might get some flack for mentioning tutors, and this is not the first, and will not be the last that you hear me ever talk about tutors, particularly in these lists. That said, Mystical Tutor is around $22, and it's been printed a few times anyway. It's just, it's a good card. I don't think it should be $22. Just, did I mention these lists are like just purely my opinion? I should probably say that. These lists are purely my opinion. especially with the next couple. The next one up is Mystic Remora. It's an enchantment for a single blue. Has a cumulative upkeep of 1, which means each upkeep you pay 1, and then 2, and then 3 to keep it around. If you don't, it gets sacrificed. But whenever an opponent successfully casts a non-creature spell, you may draw a card. They may pay 4 generic mana to counter this ability. I think I've seen maybe one time that somebody paid 4 to counter the ability. Yeah. It's a very good card. It's currently sitting at $15. Not the most expensive on the list, but the way I've seen prices going, give it another 5-6 years before it's, a $30 card. And the last blue card I want to talk about, it was between several different counter spells, like Mana Drain, stuff like that. But the one I chose is Fierce Guardianship. Fierce Guardianship is an instant for 2 and a blue. If you control your commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost, counter target non-creature spell. Yes, it's a negate. But 9 times out of 10, it is a free negate. And it's $50. $50. And I get that it was in a precon and it was only in one deck. And we're going to talk about some of that in a little bit too, with how that affects prices. But $50 for a negate. That's a little excessive if you ask me. But we're gonna kind of skip through this because blue is not my favorite color. Actually, neither is white, contrary to what many people might believe. We're going to talk about my favorite color next, and my favorite color is black. Okay, now how I just mentioned in the blue section about how we're going to talk about tutors? Well, I've got 3 in black that I want to talk about. The first one being the OG Demonic Tutor. Monik Tudor is a sorcery for 1 and a black. Search the library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. Clean, simple. The card is $40, which actually isn't as bad as it was in the past, and it has seen a couple of reprints. But if this doesn't see consistent reprints, the price is just going to go back up. Regardless, the next one is Vampiric Tutor, which is an instant for a single black mana. Search your library for a card, shuffle your library, put that card on top of it, you lose 2 life. So this is the black version of Mystical Tutor, and it's sitting at $58. I do get it's a very good card, but $58. But regardless, onward to the third tutor we're going to talk about in black, Diabolic Intent. Is a sorcery for 1 and a black. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, search your library for a card, then put that card in your hand, shuffle your library. $33. And I'm sitting here like, man, why is that so expensive? It was in Battle Bond. And then I remember, Battle Bond was a few years ago. It's just, I want to be able to play with fun cards, and I don't want them to, cost $30 or $40. But speaking of fun cards, Necropotence is an enchantment that says skip your draw step. It costs black, and And whenever you discard a card, you exile that card from your graveyard, and you can pay 1 life to exile the top card of your library face down, and then you put that card into your hand at the beginning of your next end step. Yes, this is a combo card. Yes, I have definitely killed myself with a Necropotence before. And yes, I have seen somebody take somebody else's turn and kill them with their own Necropotence. But it should not be a $45 card. It's a very good card, but should not be $45. It's just, and I know some people don't agree with, the tutors and the mass draw. I prefer to let the community govern itself. If you don't like tutors, don't play with tutors. Alright, either way. The last card I want to talk about in black is Damnation. Now, Damnation is a sorcery for 2 black, destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated. It is the color-shifted Wrath of God. Before this even got its last reprint, and the reprint before that, this was like an $80 or $90 card. It's still sitting at $25 after the most recent reprint in the Time Spiral Remastered set. It's just, you can get Wrath of God for like $1. That's all I gotta say about it. Either way, on to red. And red is gonna start with me reminding you that thing I said about cards coming in precons. Because the first card we're gonna start with is Dockside Extortionist. It's a Goblin Pirate for 1 and a red. It's a 1/2. And when Dockside Extortionist enters the battlefield, you create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. This card is commanding a $70 price tag right now. $70. And I was debating when I was making this list whether I wanted to talk about the Extortionist or Ragavan, because Ragavan is like $90 right now. But Dockside made the list because, again, came in a precon. So it could clearly be put into a precon again. Just throwing that out there. But similarly, Deflecting SWAT also came in precons. It's an instant for 2 and a red. If you control your commander, you may cast it without paying its mana cost, and you can choose new targets for target's spell or ability. So it's a free redirect. $40 to get a copy of Deflecting SWAT. And red is still kind of very much in the same boat that white is. Not to the same extent. Red has gotten a lot more help over the last few years. This is the kind of thing that would help it, especially if there was more in circulation. Regardless, next up we have Jessica's Will. And Jessica's Will is 2 and a red for a sorcery. Choose one if you control your commander. When you cast a spell, you can choose both. You add red for each card in target opponent's hand, or you exile the top 3 cards of your library, and you may play them this turn. Card is very good, and $28. I remember buying a couple of them when they were like $5. I think $5 would be a spectacular price for those. Just $28, yeah. Can you tell there's a lot of like slight disgust in my voice as I'm saying some of these prices? Either way, Terror of the Peaks is a big old Dargon. He costs 3 red. He has flying. Spells your opponents cast at target Terror of the Peaks costs an additional 3 life to cast. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. And it's a 5/4. So, Terror of the Peaks is a Warstorm Surge that is 1, cheaper, and 2, a beater. And it's currently sitting at about $26. As someone who likes to just play big dumb Dargons, I would like this big dumb Dargon to not be $26. And that kind of brings me into my last one as well, which is a Bellfire Dragon, which is another big old Dargon. It costs 5 red. It's a 6/6, has flying, and whenever Bellfire Dragon deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each creature that player controls. Commands a $35 price tag for a big old Dargon. And I like big old Dargons. Big old Dargons are fun. Might be hard to cast, but they're fun. Alright, we're going to round out the first part of the podcast, which is definitely going to be a long one, with green. Now, I'm going to start off green with Heroic Intervention. Heroic Intervention is an instant for 1 and a green. Permanent you control, gain hexproof and indestructible till end of turn. It currently has a price tag of $12. It may not be the most on this list, but again, with some of the other stuff, if it doesn't see more reprints, it's just going to keep going up. We saw it in, I believe it was a pre-con. And that did bring the price down a little bit. I believe it was like 15 before that. Either way, keeping these cards in circulation is going to help keep the price on the lower side. It's just that's all there is to it. But after that, we have one of the OG green card advantage cards with Sylvan Library. It's an enchantment for 1 and a green. At the beginning of your draw step, you may draw 2 additional cards. If you do, choose 2 cards in your hand, draw on this turn, and for each of those cards, you can pay 4 life or put the card back on top of your library. So you can either way, you get to look at all 3, and you can say, well, I don't need to take damage for all 3 of these, so I'll put these 2 back, take no damage, and then, crack a fetch land and shuffle up to change what's on top of your deck. Sylvan Library is $45. And I can't say I'm surprised in the least. But this seems like the kind of card, again, that would just make sense in a Commander Precon. I get it's powerful. I do. But regardless. Next up we have Worldly Tutor. Which is, well, you guessed it, a tutor. It's an instant for a single green. Search your library for a creature card, reveal a card, shuffle your library, put the card on top of it. This is the green version of Mystical Tutor. It commands a price of $24. Yeah. And, yeah, just green tutor gets a creature. There's not really much else to say about it other than it could use a reprint. Next is one that is more expensive than I thought it was. and also the name of a podcast I listen to that I enjoy and cannot recommend more. It's Guardian Project. It's an enchantment. It costs 3 and a green, and whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control, or a creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. So this basically says, if you play Commander, and you play a creature, draw a card. I remember this card being $1. It's currently sitting at 20. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that I bought like 7 or 8 when I did. I may feel the same way about Helm of the Host. I bought a bunch of those when they were like 5. But that's the kind of card that people like to play with. So if we could just keep reprinting it, that would be aces, my dudes. The last one in green is kind of cheating because it's also an artifact, but it is the Great Henge. 7 green. It costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. It taps to add green, and you gain 2 life. And whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. It's a lot of text for a artifact that I've rarely seen cast for more than like 3 mana. And it's $50. And it was never cheap. Throne of Eldraine, like, Throne of Eldraine, that's all I gotta say about it. Well, this has been a very long first part of the podcast, so we're gonna kick it to our mid-roll, and then we will be back talking about colorless and multicolor cards. See you in a minute. Hey, did you know that for as little as $1 a month, you can help support this podcast? All you have to do is go to patreon.com/commandersforge, and that is CMDR_forge. That's it. That's all I got to say about it. If you want to help support the podcast, you can go there. And welcome back. Now, we're just going to hop right back into it, starting with multicolor cards. First one up on this list is Assassin's Trophy. Assassin's Trophy is an instant for a black and a green. Destroy target permanent and opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it into the battlefield, and then shuffle their library. Just good, cheap removal. $17, which is down a little bit from like the initial like 20 or 25 it was at. But we're going to try and blow through these because this podcast is already going to be on the longer side. So next up is Aurelia the Warleader, which is a big ol' angel. She is a 2 red and 2 white for a 3/4 with flying, vigilance, and haste. And whenever Aurelia the Warleader attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control, and after this phase there's an additional combat phase. Good old extra combat Aurelia. She is sitting around $21. Yeah. Moving right along. Anguished Unmaking is an instant for 1, a black and white. You exile a target non-land permanent and lose 3 life. Again, cheap removal, $11 for cheap removal. But again, in the spirit of just moving things along, after that we have Windgrace's Judgment. Windgrace's Judgment was in a precon. It was in the Jund Windgrace precon. And it's 3, a black and a green, and for each number of opponents, you destroy target non-land permanent that the player controls, and it is an instant. It's only $5, but again, seeing the way prices have been moving, I expect to see this jump closer to 10 in the coming years. It would be nice to get a reprint now before it gets super, expensive. After that, we're looking at Culling Ritual. Now, Culling Ritual is a sorcery for 2, a black and a green. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Add black or green to your mana pool for each permanent destroyed this way. Again, $5. And it's from Strixhaven. I feel like the longer we go without seeing it reprinted, the more it's going to be, because this is just a really good spell. And speaking of really good spells, our last one that we're going to talk about in the multicolor, Fractured Identity. Fractured Identity, sorcery, 3, a white and a blue, exile target non-land permanent. Each player other than its controller creates a token that's a copy of it. $7, again, from Precon. Again, just could see a large price increase over the next few years. Yeah, that's going to do it for multicolored stuff. Now we're going to talk about the really expensive stuff. The colorless stuff. Okay, now with colorless, you're going to notice one theme. They are all mana rocks, for the most part. The first one being Mana Crypt. 0 mana artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, it deals 3 damage to you, and it taps for 2 colorless. $160. And yes, I get people are like, oh, it's so powerful. Well, I think part of the reason it's so powerful is because it's so expensive. So most people can't afford to just casually own it. That's why it sees a little more play in like the competitive side of the format. I digress. Next, we have Mana Vault. Much the same, except it costs 1 mana. It doesn't untap during your untap step. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can pay 4 to untap it. And at the beginning of your draw step, if it's tapped, it deals 1 damage to you. But it taps for 3 mana. Again, I feel like this would see a hell of a lot more play if it wasn't $70. Just throwing that out there. Alright, next up on the list, we have the least expensive card I have in the colorless slot. It's a Lotus Pedal. Lotus Pedal is a 0 mana artifact that you can tap and sacrifice to add 1 color of any to your mana pool. $19. But are you seeing a trend here? Let's look at Mox Opal. Mox Opal, 0 mana artifact, legendary artifact, has Metalcraft, and you can tap to add 1 mana of any color. But you activate this ability only if you control 3 or more artifacts. It was banned in Modern, and it's still $58. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't even have Mox Diamond on this list because I know that's a pipe dream, but just in case you're wondering, it's $700 right now. No, next up on my list is Jeweled Lotus. Jeweled Lotus is 0 mana for an artifact. You can tap and sack it to add 3 mana of any 1 color. You can only spend this mana to cast your commander. Boy howdy, is that a good card for Commander. it's still $100. Huh, imagine that. Either way, Mox Amber. Anybody who played in Dominaria remembers that Mox Amber, the price was never really crazy, and a lot of people didn't think it was going to see that much play. But it's 0 mana, legendary artifact, taps add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures and planeswalkers you control. And it's slowly encroaching $40. Very slowly. Our last one, I call it a mana rock, but it's really not. It's actually more of a combo piece. That is Phyrexian Altar. 3 generic mana for an artifact. Sacrifice a creature. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. It just sack creatures, make mana. $80. $80 for a Phyrexian Arena. And I remember listening to Brainstorm Brewery and Jason Alt basically just saying, like, Wizards kind of missed their chance to, like, be able to put Phyrexian Altar in precons. I say, screw it. Don't be a coward, Wizards. Throw Phyrexian Arena into precons. Alright, that's going to be it for today. If you enjoyed this long, rambly list, hit the like button wherever you happen to be listening to it. Spotify, YouTube, all that jazz. If you are listening on YouTube, could you be so kind as to, hit the subscribe button and the little bell for notifications? I'd greatly appreciate it. Alright, that said, if you want to find me or any of my links, like helping beat the taxman off my back, those links are either in my bio or in the description. Yeah, I think that's going to do it. So I will see you next time. That brings us to the end of the podcast. I would like to thank Nate and Erica Jacobs for designing my logo, and Cody Mulpey and Ian Foss for allowing me to use a sample of music from their band, The Crypt. The podcast can be found on YouTube by searching Commander's Forge. The podcast is Commander's Forge, that is CMDR_Forge on Twitter. I can be found on Twitter at BentzMr, that is BENTZMR. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, here's to fun games and sick plays.